Welcome to NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. I am Adam Rank. That is Kimmy Checks. That is Marcus Grant. And Kimmy, how you living?
I'm good. Happy week 7, guys. Happy Sunday. I'm excited. Right after we wrap this show, we get to watch some football. I'm doing some brisket on the grill today. And my Chiefs are going to bring home a W, so I'm good. Marcus, how are you? How's your weekend? I know you're a Dodgers fan, so are you okay? What's going on?
We're here. We're coping. We're making the best of it. Right now, I'm distracting myself by going through my 15 different lineups and making all the necessary changes. So that's taking my mind off of what happened in Game 4.
You know what? I think a lot of people would suggest that that's karma for trying to pretend that Mookie Betts is better than Mike Trout. But check it out. If you have a question for us today, you can hit us up on Twitter at NFL Fantasy, or if you're watching this show on YouTube at youtube.com/NFL, our own Michael F. Florio is sitting there answering all of your Twitter questions. He's not wearing floral today. I'm going to have to get to the bottom of that at some point, but you know what? He's an absolute fantasy genius, so if you need any help this week, even if you want to talk kickers, there's a snow game in Denver. We can go ahead and check that out. And besides, just a reminder, too, as well, the Vikings, the Dolphins, the Colts, and the Ravens, they're going to be on a bye this week, so make sure that none of those players, like Rodrigo Blankenship, speaking of kickers, I'm going to get this kicker talk in no matter what, but you can go ahead and make sure that your lineups are all square set away. Michael F. Florio will be here with all your sleepers and all that good stuff. But first, what I would like to start off with, though, is let's talk about some starts of the week. And Kim, why don't you kick us off?
All right. Now, you alluded to it earlier. You said that there's going to be a snow game, and it is going to be a snow game between the Chiefs and the Broncos, that game being played in Denver. And who's going to ball out from that? None other than Tyreek the Freak, the Cheetah, Tyreek Hill. He is an absolute start of the week for me going up against the Broncos. James Palmer from the NFL Network reported earlier that the Chiefs are really excited about this snow game because they said Patrick Mahomes plays even better in the snow, and Tyreek Hill is going to benefit from that. He's had a receiving touchdown in 5 of 6 games this season, and in the 2 games last season in 2019 that he played against the Denver Broncos, he brought home 3 different touchdowns. So I absolutely think this is going to be a bounce-back game for Tyreek Hill after having kind of a disappointing week last week against the Buffalo Bills. There's snow on the ground. It's fun. It's a divisional rivalry game. Tyreek Hill is going to put up at least 25 fantasy points.
I'm going to go with Teddy Bridgewater as my start of the week this week. And, we knew that from the beginning of the season, we were going to have Teddy Bridgewater as kind of a streaming option when the matchup was right. And this is a good matchup. I mean, the Saints have given up the 4th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. And so this is an opportunity to get Teddy into your lineup, especially, say if you have Lamar Jackson, that he's on a bye. Maybe you were starting Ryan Fitzpatrick or you were anticipating starting Tua. Those guys are on a bye as well. So this is an opportunity to get Teddy in the lineup and hope he puts up a good number for you.
Yeah, in addition to that, Marcus, I picked up Teddy Bridgewater in a league where I was starting Gardner Minshew because Ian Rappaport said this morning that there is a chance that he could be benched, despite the fact that he's had at least 18 fantasy points in 3 consecutive games. One player, though, that I'm looking forward to starting this week is Davante Adams. He has averaged over 20 fantasy points per game this season. That's second most in the NFL. His 7.7 receptions, per game. That, of course, tied for the second most in the NFL. And he's got a great matchup this week. He's going up against the Houston Texans, who have allowed a top 5 fantasy receiver in 2 of the last 3 games. Houston has allowed a lot of offensive production this season. And with Aaron Jones being out this week, I think a lot of the focus on this offense is going to shift to Davante Adams. And speaking of Aaron Jones, why don't we take a look at the injury board and go through some of the Week 7 notable actives and inactives. Aaron Jones not playing. Jamal Williams becomes a must-start. The Bengals RB1 is out. Raheem Mostert is out. And at the wide receiver position, you see some big names there. The biggest probably being Michael Thomas, who, again, is not going to be playing for the New Orleans Saints this week. But a little bit of good news. Jonnu Smith is active against the Pittsburgh Steelers today. Significant because if the Steelers are focused on shutting down Derrick Henry, that could mean more opportunity for Ryan Tannehill and his top receiving options, A.J. Brown and Jonnu Smith. So With all that being said, we're going to go back to Aaron Jones and him being out. We started to get some inclination of this at the end of last week. Obviously, Jamal Williams has been picked up. Do we trust starting him this week, Kim?
I think we have to, especially with those 4 teams that you noted earlier that are on a bye week. There really aren't a lot of options across the board. I think, definitely with Aaron Jones being out, the opportunities are going to be there for Jamal Williams. So I think he is a must start. What do you think, Marcus?
I think Jamal Williams is an excellent start this week. I mean, the Houston Texans defense has been pretty awful against running games, and so we know Jamal Williams, he can be a quality back when he gets the opportunity. It's just that Aaron Jones has been so much better for the last year and a half, 2 years or so. But given a full workload, I think Jamal Williams could put up a pretty nice number today.
I mean, is he a must start? Yes. I think that's the thing. Like, you have to start him because the matchup's so good. And, of course, if you're in a deeper league, I think that A.J. Dillon is somebody to go and take a look at because, they drafted him in the second round last year. It led a lot of us, including me, to believe that he was going to be somebody that was going to end up taking over that role from Aaron Jones. One of the reasons why I tried to fade Aaron Jones during the preseason. But another big issue today will be in Cincinnati. Giovanni Bernard. We all added him once we found out that there was going to be a vacancy there at the running back position. Marcus, are we starting Gio today?
I think we are starting Gio today. I mean, you look over my shoulder here, and I got Gio Storm all set up, right? We're ready to go. We're ready for the opportunity. On paper, the matchup is just an okay one. I mean, the Browns are sort of middle of the pack when it comes to facing fantasy running backs, but this really is a situation where you're talking about volume. We knew that Gio had been kind of the pass-catching back of record when the Bengals were in hurry-up mode and playing catch-up. He was the guy on the field, so we know he's going to get those pass opportunities, but he's also going to get a lot of carries today without Joe Mixon. So I think this is an opportunity to at least have him as a flex, maybe an RB2, depending on your situation.
I 100% agree. And also, this is going to be a back and forth contest where Joe Burrow is really going to want to be able to put some points on the board. And I think Giovanni Bernard is going to be one of the main options for that. I understand that he can get involved in both the passing and the run game, which is good and kind of exploits different options for Joe Burrow to throw to. So I 100% agree and think people should absolutely get Giovanni Bernard into their starting lineup.
An absolute solid flex play at worst. All right. Time now for 15 for 15 presented by Geico. And we're going to be looking out or dishing out our top 15 starts of the week and then some more because you know what? It's Sunday Fun Day! Woo-hoo! There it is. All right. Let's look at our stardom board at the quarterback position. Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert, Ryan Tannehill. We just talked about the Steelers trying to shut down the run game. I like Joey Burrow in this game as well. The last time he played the Browns, he threw the ball 61 times. Teddy Bridgewater is another guy. But Marcus, which one? You know what? Can you just stick with the board this week? Can you just order off the menu? Is there a quarterback that I have listed here that you would start this week?
Well, I'm going to go with the top of the specials there and go with Matthew Stafford against the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, I could just make my whole analysis just say Falcons, but I think we got to fill some more time. So I'm going to say Falcons because their defense has been pretty bad. They are giving up the most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. And I think part of it is that now having an expanded role for DeAndre Swift means you've got a back you can have out there most of the time. And if things do break down, it's a guy, can catch the football and do things with it afterwards. So I think this is a really good week to get Stafford in the lineup.
I like that, Marcus, but then I get so scared because we've seen multiple quarterbacks this season who have favorable matchups and then they just don't do anything with it. But speaking of favorable matchups and a guy who I think is going to bounce back, it's Josh Allen taking on the Jets this Sunday. Now, he's had 25-plus fantasy points in 4 games this season. That's tied for the most in the NFL alongside Kyler Murray. But going up against the Jets, they are allowing the 4th most points to quarterbacks this season. That's 30 fantasy points per game. So I think Josh Allen is going to eat today. I also think that means good things for his receivers. So Josh Allen, bounce back game against the Jets.
Let's take a look at the running back position here. We can get that going. There we go. Ronald Jones against the Las Vegas Raiders, who have allowed a lot of fantasy production. Todd Gurley, James Conner, Phillip Lindsay, Kareem Hunt. You know what? I went 6 this week because I wanted people to stop freaking out about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Snow game for him. I'm loving that opportunity. Kim, who is a running back that you absolutely like this week?
Okay, I'm going to go off menu again with this one, and I want to talk about David Johnson, who's going up against the Packers. Rink, you should like this because I'm saying that he's going to blow up the Packers and be really good against them.
All right.
Because Green Bay is giving up the most fantasy points per game to running backs this season. They're also allowing almost 60 receiving yards per game to running backs. That's second most in the NFL. Now, David Johnson, he was okay last week. He's also been okay this season. He's ranking 27th amongst running backs, but I really do think this is a good matchup. It's a really good opportunity for them to consistently run the ball. This should be a high-scoring affair between Deshaun Watson and the quarterback that you hate, Adam Rank. So David Johnson all the way. Amazing matchup. I'm excited for this one.
I like that David Johnson called this week. I do think this is an opportunity for him to have a decent game. But I'm going to go with Ronald Jones, who has been fantastic. He's got 3 straight games with over 100 rushing yards. And I'm not quite so worried about Leonard Fournette being back and being active. I think Rojo has shown that he is the lead back here. He's played very well this season. And, after he got past that quote-unquote fumble, which I still believe was mostly the fault of Tom Brady, he's picked it up, and he's played very well, and he's got a great matchup against the Raiders this week, who are really terrible against fantasy running backs.
You do not besmirch the king like that. All right, let's take a look at the starting wide receivers that I have listed for you this week. Tyler Boyd, Terry McLaurin. It's an Odell Beckham Jr. week. Yep, we ring the bell when you start Odell. DJ Chark, Chase Claypool. Marcus, why don't you give us a running back? I need you to go off menu, though. Give us an additional one. Actually, I want both of you to go off the menu. Who you got, Marcus?
Well, I went with Matthew Stafford as the quarterback, so why not just stack him with his number 1 wide receiver, and that's Kenny Golladay. And Galladay's had some nice games. He missed, obviously, the early part of the season with an injury, but since then, he stepped in, and he looks like the guy that we expected him to be. And so if you believe that his quarterback is going to go off against a bad Falcons defense, why wouldn't you think that Galladay himself, as the wide receiver 1 in Detroit, is going to go out and have an equally good game against this same Falcons secondary?
All right, Marcus, stack them up. But I want to talk about a guy who earlier you guys are talking about his quarterback, so I want to stick with this theme. Let's go with Robbie Anderson taking on the Saints. Again, it's so funny. Every single time we talk about Robbie Anderson, I have to always mention that once you get away from Adam Gase, good things happen for you in fantasy football. So Robbie Anderson, thank you for getting away from him and now being a Carolina Panther, because he's the 15th wide receiver in terms of fantasy this season. He's been a top 18 wide receiver in 4 of 6 weeks. Now, going up against the Saints, they've allowed 7 receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this season. That's in the top 5 in the NFL. So I think it's going to be a fun game for Teddy Bridgewater to be back in New Orleans, and I think he's going to feed Robbie Anderson and get some major points on the board.
Yeah, that is such a great call about Robbie Anderson and Kenny Golladay. I love both of those guys. And let's take a look right now at the starting tight ends. I've got TJ Hawkinson, Hunter Henry. I put in there Rob Gronkowski, Tyler Higbee. Now, realize he's been hovering around the injury board, so make sure that if you're going to be waiting until Monday night to figure out what you're doing here, that you have a way to insulate yourself with Gerald Everett and Robert Tonyan, who I really do believe could be a factor for the Green Bay Packers this week because of the injury once again, to Aaron Jones. And we could see Tonyan get a couple of those goal line looks, or targets, I should say, that have been going to Aaron Jones this season. So I would go ahead and pick him up. Also, remember, Austin Hooper is out. All right, that was 15 for 15 presented by Geico. And Nick Cage movies are the ultimate boom or bust situations. They're either amazing, like The Rock, or Con Air, or dreadful, like, Ghost Rider. Which players were going to be booming or busting, or who's going to be ghosting your team? You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. Oh, and there's Zeke. Enjoy the sights of Zeke warming up as this show rolls on. Last election, millions of voters were unable to cast their ballots. Why? No game plan. Join the NFL family by making your game plan today and making your voice heard this November. Visit NFL.com/votes to learn more. There is Deshaun Watson getting ready for a big game this week against the Green Bay Packers. We're anticipating a lot of fantasy points. Maybe throwing some to Brandon Cooks. Maybe giving the ball to David Johnson. These are obviously personal requests. Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day. Adam Rank here alongside Kimmy Checks, Marcus Grant, helping you get ready for Week 7. Of course, one game already in the books. I know you all have tons of questions. Be sure to hit us up at NFL Fantasy on Twitter, or if you're watching the show via YouTube, youtube.com/NFL. Our Michael F. Florio is there diligently answering all of your questions, trying to get you ready for these big games. This is a pivotal week in the fantasy season, but you know what? We can't let Florio have all the fun. Why don't we take a look at some of the fan questions that are coming here? And I should have my screen better adjusted. I got my rundown here. I got a lot of stuff. Okay. Mr. Fahrenheit wants to know Chris Godwin or Keenan Allen. Kimmy, who do you got?
Ooh, the Chargers are going up against the Jags, so I kind of want to – I'm going to swing Keenan Allen on this one. He's eaten with Justin Herbert at quarterback, so Allen all the way.
I like that call. That's a pretty good one. And Mahomes or Justin Herbert, weather might be a factor for Kansas City. Marcus, are you buying this?
I'm not. Like, I understand. Like, everybody sees snow and they freak out. The thing you have to worry about is wind, and the wind is not supposed to be crazy high there in that game. So I'm not so worried about Patrick Mahomes. You heard Kimmy talk about Tyreek Hill earlier. I'm starting Mahomes over Herbert.
And Mahomes is trying to sell us on, like, I throw the ball better in the snow, but he probably
He does. He said he has a better
right.
grip. He says, I grip the ball better. No Patrick Mahomes slander allowed. Stop it.
Fine. Okay. Full point PPR, Deontay Johnson or DJ Moore at the flex. I'm going to go with DJ Moore for a lot of the reasons that Kimmy was talking about previously. That matchup against the New Orleans Saints should be a pretty good one for not only Teddy Bridgewater, but the receivers as well. This feels like a DJ Moore week. So there you go. Those were our, fan tweets. Now what we're going to do, we're going to be talking about boom or bust. I was talking about Nicolas Cage movies before the break, and listen, they're mostly awesome, but every once in a while there's a couple of duds. Ghost Rider, I'm talking to you. What about this week, though? Marcus, if there was a boom or bust player that you were thinking of, who was on your mind?
I'm going with Juju Smith-Schuster, and really, it's like if he's a Nicolas Cage movie, he might be Face Off, right? Because some weeks he really is. Some weeks, he's one guy, and some weeks he's another. I don't know if he's going to be, Castor Troy or Sean Archer this week. I have no idea. But he does have an opportunity to go out and be really good against this Titans secondary. The problem has been that they've been using him basically as a short yardage possession receiver. So the targets have been there, just not the yards or the touchdowns. But I think this is a week that the opportunity for him to go and have a big number is certainly available.
I'm rooting for Chase Claypool as well, but I have a ton of shares of Juju, so I'm kind of also rooting against Chase Claypool so Juju can finally get back in the end zone and be that fantasy player we know and love. But Adam Ray, do you have that bell handy that you had earlier? Ring it, because I'm talking about Odell Beckham Jr. going up against the Cincinnati Bengals today. Okay, that's enough bell. No more cowbell. Now I say high risk, high reward because it seems like every time I speak out against Odell Beckham Jr. and say he's not a must start, then he goes out and he completely balls out. He had 17 fantasy points against the Bengals in week 2. That's when he was 19th amongst wide receivers. He's actually ranked 18th right now, so he's been productive. This is why it's kind of like a meh for me. But I think Odell Beckham Jr. has a good matchup, especially with Jarvis Landry saying he's playing through an injury. I think Odell Beckham Jr. will eat. So ring the bell one more time, Adam Ring. Thank you.
When we ring the bell, you start Odell, and I don't have any fancy sound effects for Antonio Gibson, but I really like him in this contest against the Dallas Cowboys. He's had at least 11 touches in every game this season. I almost said 11 touchdowns. That'd be a record. 11 touches in every game this season. The Cowboys have allowed the second most rushing yards per game this year. They've allowed a top 15 running back in 3 consecutive games, and I know that J.D. McKissic is also there as well, but we really do like the fact that Antonio Gibson seems to be also factored more and more into the passing game. And I know the Cowboys are not going to be as dreadful as they were on Monday night, but it's not like that defense is going to get that much better in the course of 6 weeks. So there it is. Those are our boom or bust players. That's it. That's all we got for you. No, we got other stuff. Check it out. Up next, we're going to be going through the running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions to get your rosters ready to shine. Plus, top sleepers. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. Jamal Williams already dancing in the end zone. Remember last time the Packers had a celebration in an end zone that kind of went off a little bit too long? And then the Bucs went out and scored 38 consecutive points. Maybe calm it down just a little bit. Am I a bitter Bears fan? Of course I am. But we're in first place. What do I care? And welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. I'm Adam Rank. That's Kimmy Checks. That's Marcus Grant. We're going to run through the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends, and just kind of put some of those tough questions out there that you're probably wrestling with this morning. And we're going to go, we're just going to go rapid fire here. Just rapid fire. We're going to start at the running back position. And let's start running back face-off. James Robinson versus the Chargers, or Todd Gurley versus the Lions. Kimmy.
All right, I'm going to rock with James Robinson on this one because I think Todd Gurley is way too touchdown dependent, and Robinson is involved in both the run and the passing game.
David Montgomery versus the Rams, or David Johnson versus the Packers. Marcus.
I'm going to go David Johnson versus the Packers because their run defense has been pretty awful. The Rams have been pretty good, pretty decent against running backs.
Devin Singletary versus the Jets. Melvin Gordon versus the Chiefs. Kim, who do you got?
Devin Singletary. I think Melvin Gordon, it's a really tough matchup against the Chiefs and the Jets. They're allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to running backs this season. So Devin Singletary hopefully will eat today.
DeAndre Swift versus the Falcons, or Kenyon Drake against the Seahawks. Marcus.
I'm going DeAndre Swift here. They keep saying he's going to have an expanded role. The Falcons' defense is bad. Meanwhile, Kenyon Drake, I think, comes back to earth after that big game against the Cowboys.
Let's move to the wide receiver position. Robbie Anderson versus the Saints, or Terry McLaurin versus the Cowboys. Give me checks!
I liked Robbie Anderson earlier, but Terry McLaurin because hashtag Cowboys defense. So yes, Terry McLaurin.
That's a good one. I feel like McRanklin is starting to emerge here. Allen Robinson versus the Rams or Tyler Lockett against the Cardinals. Marcus.
We're going A-Rob here because he seems to be pretty much matchup and quarterback proof. Plus, Tyler Lockett's been kind of disappointing, and that Cardinals secondary is kind of tough.
CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, which Cowboys wide receiver against the Washington FT? Kimmy.
I'm going to do Amari Cooper on this one. He's had a receiving touchdown in 2 of 3 games, and he got 13 targets from Andy Dalton, which led all receivers. So Amari on this one.
Marcus, let's put you on the 1s and 2s. DJ Chark or DJ Moore?
DJ Chark. I'm going to go with him against the Chargers. DJ Moore's has been such a disappointment that I'm not even sure I trust him in good matchups.
Oh, my gosh. I have that dilemma. That was a personal one for me. All right, let's go to the tight end face-off. Kimmy, TJ Hawkinson or Hunter Henry against the Jags?
TJ Hawkinson, my Hawkeye, because the Falcons have allowed the most receiving touchdowns to tight ends this season. Hawkinson has also scored in 3 of 5 games. So Hawkinson all the way this week.
Marcus, Robert Tonyan or Darren Fells?
Tonyan, because I like Funyuns. Also because the Texans tight ends seem to be harder to figure out. It's either Fells or it's Akins. That's just been a little bit dicier to kind of decipher this year.
Also, Darren Fells is a UCI anteater, so we never want to start him. Kimmy, Austin Hooper versus the Bengals or Jared Cook versus the Panthers? You better get this right because one of these guys is inactive.
I'm going to go with Jared Cook. Yay, it's so obvious. But also both Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas, they are out of today's contest, so I think Jared Cook is going to be heavily involved in the receiving game.
By the way, I meant Hayden Hurst. I'm so sorry. I'm an idiot, okay? What everybody knows this. Jimmy Graham versus the Rams or Gronk versus the Raiders. Marcus, who do you got?
I'm going to take Jimmy Graham here. I still am not completely sold on Gronk. I know he had a good game last week, but I'm just not fully buying in. And even though the matchup's not great, I just do think the Bears are trying to get the football to Graham a little bit more.
Yeah, I like Jimmy Graham a lot this week, too. I think the receivers could be in a little bit of trouble, but it could be a tight end game. Time now for some fantasy insurance, though. Fantasy insurance presented by Geico. 4 teams are on a bye: the Vikings, the Dolphins, the Colts, and the Ravens. So let's give you some of our favorite sleepers this week. Marcus, why don't you lead us off here?
I'm going to go Christian Kirk. I don't know if he qualifies as a sleeper, but he's in this segment, so we're calling him that. He's got a great matchup this week. He's got a great matchup against the Seahawks, who they have given up, I think, the most fantasy points to wide receivers so far this season. Just about almost 60 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position this year. And Kirk started to pick it up. He's starting to get more targets from Kyler Murray. I mean, it's pretty much a DeAndre Hopkins-centered offense, but Kirk's starting to get more love, and so I think this is a good week to have him in.
Christian Kirk sat on my bench last week and then put up 22 points, so that wasn't fun, and then I lost. But anyway, I want to talk about T. Higgins. And yes, I guess this qualifies him as a sleeper, but for weeks now, I've been hyping this guy up, and it's because he's good. He's had 10-plus fantasy points in 4 straight games. He finished as a top 15 fantasy wide receiver in 2 of the last 4, and he really is becoming one of Joe Burrow's favorite targeted guys on the team. Now, going up against the Browns, who have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season, I really feel like this could be a huge week and a huge breakout game for T. Higgins. So get him in your lineup at the flex position if you're looking for a guy.
He is really starting to come on this season. And I'm going to go, I'm going to stick with the wide receiver position as well. I'm going to go with Marvin Jones going up against the Atlanta Falcons. We all know the routine, the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. They've allowed the 2nd most receiving yards per game to wide receivers this season. And you know what? Marvin Jones is always due for that classic Marvin Jones blow-up game where he has 3 touchdowns while he's sitting on the bench. Why do you have to show that one? That he just runs over poor Jalen Johnson right there? That was actually the worst play for Jalen Johnson this season. He has been a stud so far. Listen to me. I should be stumping for Marvin Jones, but now I'm egregious. That was good defense right there. Anyway, start Marvin Jones this week. And that was Fantasy Insurance presented by Geico. When Aaron Rodgers is mad, he's meaner than Vicky at a Real Housewives of Orange County reunion and twice as petty. Up next, we're talking Rodgers and the quarterback position in Week 7 during our Burning Questions segment. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. There he is, A.J. Brown, getting warmed up for this pivotal game against the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers, a battle of the unbeaten. Cynthia Freeland, just noticed right now, is picking the Titans in a 1-point win with Derrick Henry not doing a lot on the ground, which means that would be ample opportunity for A.J. Brown and Jonnu Smith and, of course, Ryan Tannehill. Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Game Day, presented by Geico. Rank, Kim, MG. I want to remind you all to download the all-new NFL Fantasy app, because not only is it, the best fantasy football app there is, you can watch live local games. And I'm talking every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and whenever we have games, if it's live and it's local, it'll be on the all-new NFL Fantasy app. So download it right now. If you go to my IG, links in the bio. Whatever. Adam Rank NFL. Whatever. We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about Week 7 burning questions at the quarterback position. How big of a bounce back is Aaron Rodgers going to have this week against the Texans? First of all, I compared him to Vicky from the Real Housewives of Orange County, which, you know what? Both of them, not great. We don't like either one of them. But this week, I love Aaron Rodgers. I think he's going to have, 60 points? That seems a little outlandish. Kim, what would you think? What's a more reasonable expectation for Aaron Rodgers this week?
I don't think this is going to be a crazy Aaron Rodgers games where he goes and puts up 30-plus fantasy points. I think he'll be somewhere in the range of 18, 19, 20 fantasy points. The Texans are averaging just about that many points against quarterbacks in 4 of 6 games this season. Now, Aaron Rodgers, he's been productive. I know you don't like to hear that, Adam Rank, because you're a hater, but he's been a top 7 quarterback in 3 of 5 games this season. He's almost averaging 3 passing touchdowns a game, which is incredible. So I think he's going to be good, but I also think that it's a tougher matchup than a lot of us would expect. So I got him right around 18, 19 fantasy points. Marcus, what do you think, though? Higher, lower? I feel like this is a Price is Right. Higher or lower? Give me a price.
I'm going to go a little bit higher than 18 points. I'll put him around 23 or 24 points for this one. I do think the Texans' pass defense is a little bit tougher than we're giving it credit for, but I also think that they are going to ask Rodgers maybe to do a little bit more because there's no Aaron Jones this week. And this isn't to besmirch Jamal Williams, who I think is a very good running back, but he's not their primary guy. So I do think you're going to see Rodgers spread the ball around a little bit more, and so I think you see that number bump up into probably the low to mid-20s.
I don't want to defame the Texans defense, but Deshaun Watson did last week with his reaction to losing the coin toss. He knew the Texans couldn't even hold the Titans to a field goal, that he was not going to see the football again. Let's talk, though, about Matt Ryan. Last week, he was the quarterback, too. Marcus, I'll go back to you. How do we feel about Matt Ryan this week?
I think he's going to slide into the back part of the top 10. I definitely don't think he's going to be the quarterback, too. The Lions certainly have their issues defensively, and the Falcons find a way to score points, and a lot of it is because they are throwing the football consistently. It certainly helps that Julio Jones is back. We saw how much of a difference he makes in that offense versus when he wasn't there or when he was less than 100%. So I think we get back to seeing the Matt Ryan that we expected to see early in the season. So I would say that I got him right around, let's call it QB 10, just make it an even number.
Okay, speaking of QB 10, this is a really fun stat because I was looking up Matt Ryan and how productive he's been in fantasy so far, and our researchers had this really good stat. Matt Ryan has not finished as QB number 9 through QB number 22 in a single week this season. That means he's either been a top 8 quarterback or he's fallen past the number 2 fantasy football spot. So it's really interesting. Either he's really productive or he's not productive at all. So I think it's a decent matchup against the Lions, who have allowed over 20 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. So I'm hoping we get a good Matt Ryan. I have him starting, and I'm crossing my fingers for another productive performance.
A lot of people probably have a question this week about Ryan Tannehill because he's going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let me put this question out there, Kimmy. Ryan Tannehill or Justin Herbert? Which way are you going?
Ooh, I would still start Ryan Tannehill if I had him, but this is an interesting one because the Steelers defense is good, and I actually really like Justin Herbert. So I know this is a kind of this helps no one, but if I absolutely had to pick, I was being forced to. I think I'm rocking with Justin Herbert on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay with that too and go Tannehill. The guy's been great all year long, and every time we try to doubt him or discount him in some sort of way, he comes back and he continues to produce. So I think that's going to continue to be the case this week against the Steelers defense that's given up some yards through the air. So I do like Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that one. Tannehill has just been way too consistent to sit on the bench, and really, you probably should deal one of those quarterbacks so you don't have to deal with this each and every week. Let's take a look right now at some fan questions and see if we can answer.
Just jumped in here, guys.
That's all right. Listen,
this is live TV from home.
Let the dog do what they got to do. Do we have some fan tweets here? There it is. With Aaron Jones out, Jamal Williams or Will Fuller in the flex. Kimmy, which way are you going?
Ooh, this is a good one. I think I'm actually going to rock with Will Fuller on this one. I don't know. Is that risky? Is that crazy? Am I crazy?
No. You're not crazy. Is that, by the way, is that Andrew Clark of Erasure? I don't know. I want to believe that it is. Although Will Fuller does have Jair Alexander this week. But Joshua Kelly or Deebo Samuel for the last flex spot, Marcus.
Ooh, that's a tough call. I think I'm going to lean a little bit toward Deebo Samuel in this one, even though the matchup isn't particularly great. The Patriots have given up some points to wide receivers, and I just feel like Kyle Shanahan's pretty creative with how he gets the ball in Samuel's hands.
Yeah, I like that one too. All right, one more. A.J. Brown or Chase Claypool? I'm going to go with A.J. Brown. Again, the whole Ryan Tannehill factor. And again, we keep talking about it. If they shut down this running game, they're going to have to throw the football. And they only throw the ball to two guys predominantly, and it's either Jonnu Smith or A.J. Brown. So I would feel very comfortable having A.J. Brown in our lineup. All right, check this out. When we come back, we're going to get through all of your starts, your sits, your sleepers, all the witty banter, maybe talk more about Nick Cage movies, whatever. You're watching NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico, and we will be back in just a few short moments to get you ready for kickoff. Ben Roethlisberger getting his visiting Pittsburgh Steelers ready to go. The battle of the unbeatens happening there in Tennessee. Deontay Johnson out there. Maybe he can get back into the mix. Big Ben, for as good as the Steelers have been, has not put up the productive and prolific fantasy games. Time now for 15 minutes to kick off, presented by Geico. Here are the Week 7 notable actives and inactives. Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Raheem Mostert are out. at the running back position. That is causing a lot of consternation amongst fantasy enthusiasts at the wide receiver position. The big name, of course, Michael Thomas, continuing to miss time with the New Orleans Saints this season. But a little bit of good news. Listen, I'm going to give you some good news. Jonnu Smith active for your Tennessee Titans in that pivotal game in Tennessee. So that helps out, especially with Austin Hooper, who has, had an appendectomy this week. And that was 15 minutes to kickoff, presented by Geico. This is Kim Chex. That's Marcus Grant. And joining the show right now is Michael F. Florio. The F usually stands for floral. It doesn't look very flowery to me. How you doing, Mike? And what has been the question of the day so far?
I'm good. All my floral shirts are being washed right now. But the big questions of the day have been Gio Bernard and Jamal Williams. A lot of people wondering what to do with these now injury replacement running backs that are starting. I have both of them as top 20 backs, but more as RB2s. And some backs I said I would use over them were David Johnson, Todd Gurley, David Montgomery. But I said I would use Gio and Williams over the 49ers backs, over Kenyon Drake, over Melvin Gordon. So just a lot of questions about those two backs this morning.
Josh Jacobs with that offensive line missing practice this week. Are we cool with Josh Jacobs?
I don't love him, but I think I would use him at least over Jamal Williams. Him and Gio Bernard are much closer for me.
All right, we got some social questions because this is what you've been doing all morning. We're going to make you come in and answer social questions now. You thought it was going to be a time to come out and be like, oh, I'm going to hang out on TV now. No, dude, we're putting you to work immediately. First question, 2 of my receivers are on a bye. Who do I put in the flex? Henry Ruggs or Brandon Cooks? Florio, what do you got?
I'm going to go with Brandon Cooks there. He's been playing better as of late, getting more work from Deshaun Watson. And angry Aaron Rodgers is going to be on the other side of that ball rank, like you've been saying all morning. I expect the Texans have to put up a lot of points today.
All right, next question, please. Bobby Trees or Jerick McKinnon in PPR? Marcus, who do you got?
I think I'm going to lean with Bobby Trees in this one. McKinnon's going to get a lot of work, but Jermichael Hasty's going to be in there. You may see some Jeff Wilson potentially. So I give Robert Woods the nod.
All right, next question, please. Cooper Kupp or Mike Williams? Kimmy, who do you got?
Oh, this is a tough one. I want to say Cooper Kupp because I want to hang on for one more week, but he's been really disappointing. So actually, scratch Kupp. I want to go with Mike Williams. I think it's a better matchup, and Kupp has been burning me every single week.
One last question. Can I trust Kittle against a bad New England matchup or go with Noah Fant against KC? Understand the question, but you absolutely start George Kittle every time. I don't care if he gives you 2 points. You are starting George Kittle this week. Drop Noah Fant. I don't want to entertain this question again. So how do you not start George Kittle? I know, I get it. Anyways, let's move on. Because listen, now I was supposed to be festive. It's Sunday FUNDAY! That's right, I broke out the jacket. Boo, 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 boo! Yeah, air horns. I'm glad you got me back in the festive mood because that George Kittle question, it's got me tilting right now. I'm freaking out. So let's go with players who are going to pop off this week. And Florio, why don't you kick us off?
I'm going to go with Will Fuller. He's been great outside of that one bad week where he had 0 fantasy points. Every other game, he's given you at least 15. He's given you 20 in a good amount. But we still haven't quite seen that Will Fuller blow-up game. We know, like, last year he scored nearly 60 fantasy points in a game. I think his ceiling is the wide receiver 1 every single time he is healthy and on the field, which he will be today. And I think the Texans are going to have to be putting up points to keep up with Rodgers and the Packers. I'm expecting a lot of points out of Will Fuller today.
Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, a lot of good things for that Houston Texan receiving core. But I want to focus on Terry McLaurin. He is absolutely going to pop off and be Sunday's top scorer because get the air horn in there. Because Dallas Cowboys defense. Now the Cowboys have allowed a number 1. Okay, enough air horns, Zach. They have allowed the number 1 fantasy wide receiver in 3 of the last 5 weeks. Guys like Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, Odell Beckham Jr. They've also allowed a top 12 fantasy wide receiver in 5 straight weeks, and they're allowing the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. If there was any game for Terry McLaurin to finally blow up and have that blow-up game where we all love him and then want to start him week by week, it is going up against the Dallas Cowboys. So get Terry McLaurin in your lineup for a scary Terry performance.
McLaurin's a great pick. Will Fuller is a great pick, but Alvin Kamara is just sitting here right in front of you, not just kind of minding his own business. I mean, he's got a fantastic matchup against the Carolina Panthers, who have been one of the worst defenses against fantasy running backs pretty much all season long. On top of it, no Michael Thomas, no Emmanuel Sanders. Alvin Kamara might see like 25 targets in this game just because they have to do something to try to move the football. So I expect him to have a huge day. I think he will be the top scorer on Sunday by far.
And I have Aaron Rodgers popping off. No air horns? Okay, whatever. Listen, thank you. Thank you so much. That's what I wanted. And you know what? This is the thing, is Aaron Rodgers, I know it seems like a narrative to be like, this guy's angry this week. But the only guy I think that absolutely pertains to is Aaron Rodgers. Like, he's the dude who gets voted out of Big Brother before the final three. And he goes out and he's talking to Julie Chen Moonves and he's all upset. How could they vote me? Dude, it's a game. Like, it's a game show. Like, eventually you're all going to get voted off. So just deal with it. And so I think Aaron Rodgers is not going to take last week very well. He's going to go out there and he's going to prove a point, or else, and this is also spiteful Aaron Rodgers, is that he knows I think this way. And he's just going to hand the ball off to A.J. Dillon and let him score 5 touchdowns. And speaking of which, let's talk about some of these players. Like, we know these guys are going to pop off, but what about players that we are worried about? So, Kimmy, who is a player that you're absolutely frightened of this week?
I'm frightened. It's Halloween. I'm scared. Earlier, we got a fan question. Cooper Kupp or Mike Williams? And I actually said I'm going to go against Cooper Kupp because he's not really been fantasy productive so far this season. He's playing on Monday Night Football against your team, Adam Rank, the Chicago Bears. And he's only scored more than 25 fantasy points just once this season, and that was back in week 3. Now, last week, he only caught 3 of 9 targets, and he finished with 4 fantasy points. Now, the Chicago Bears are the 3rd best against wide receivers, averaging 28 points allowed to the entire position. So Cooper Kupp, I'm still scratching my head on what I do. He's no longer a guy that, is a must start for me. I have to continue to start him because I don't really have a lot of other options, especially with 4 teams out on a bye. But this is a tough matchup, and I'm worried about him.
I'm going to go, I get the fear of Cooper Kupp because the Rams have been sort of inconsistent, but I'm going to look at Ezekiel Elliott here. And some of it has to do with him putting the ball on the ground. That is less than optimal, having your top running back fumble it repeatedly. But I think the bigger issues are, one, the matchup that he's got against the Washington football team, who's been pretty good defensively for most of the year, and especially against fantasy running backs. They give him the 8th fewest points per game to the position. The other part is the Cowboys are really banged up along that offensive line. That had been one of their strengths offensively for the last couple of years. And right now, I think it's going to be a problem. So just a lot of things sort of working against Zeke. But then again, you probably don't have better options this week, so you're going to start him. But there's reason to be concerned.
I like that call, Marcus. I'm going to go with a big-name running back as well. I'm worried about Josh Jacobs this week against the Bucks, who are allowing less than 50 rushing yards per game to running backs, by far the lowest in the league. They also do a good job of limiting running backs from finding the end zone, and that hurts Jacobs because he is yet to score 15 fantasy points in a game without a touchdown this year. And if you're hoping for pass game usage, well, he doesn't have more than 3 catches in the game since week 1, so I'm really worried about Jacobs this week.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for stealing your thunder earlier by putting you on the spot with a Josh Jacobs question, which was selfish on my part. I could actually sit here and read the rundown at some point, but there's a star player that I'm worried about right now named Gardner Minshew. And I know a lot of people are like, is this guy really a star player? And I'm like, okay, remember back to last Halloween and try to remember how many people you knew who dressed up like Gardner Minshew. Like, we had a guy, a social media guy named Austin, who dressed up as Gardner Minshew's dad. So, yes, he's a star. And our own Ian Rappaport said today that Gardner could be benched this week if he doesn't perform well. I'm like, benched? This guy has had at least 18 fantasy points in his last 3 games in 4 of 5. Like, he's playing well. What do you want from him? Like, don't blame poor Gardner Minshew. But let's go to the running back position and start talking about some must-starts for Week 7. Marcus, who do you got?
I'm going to go with Todd Gurley here. I think it's a good spot for him against the Detroit Lions this week. we would like to see him be more involved in the passing game. That would certainly be a bonus. But the fact is the Lions have been pretty flexible against fantasy running backs this year, giving up the 6th most points per game. Plus, I know Kimmy said that Gurley can be touchdown dependent, which is true. But the good news is he keeps scoring touchdowns. For whatever reason, when they get down near the end zone, they give him the ball, and he finds his way into the painted areas. So I think we can sort of count on that against a defense that is liable to give up some scores.
I like Todd Gurley this week, Marcus, too. And I said earlier I'm worried about Josh Jacobs, but on the other side of the ball in that game, start Ronald Jones everywhere. He's rushed for over 100 yards in 3 straight games. That's the longest streak in the NFL right now. And the Raiders are just, you can run all over them. They've allowed the second most fantasy points to running backs this year. It is a great matchup. He's playing really well, getting a lot of touches. Get Ronald Jones in your lineup this week. Don't think twice about it.
Rojo, absolutely agree with you, Florio. I want to turn it over to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Because everyone's freaking out and talking about, oh, what's going to happen with Le'Veon Bell. Did you see what he did last week against the Buffalo Bills? I think that was Clyde Edwards-Helaire game to be like, let me remind all of you guys, I am the #1 back in this offense, and do not besmirch me anymore, especially in terms of fantasy football. You guys, he has had 130-plus scrimmage yards in 3 of 6 games this season. He's had over 11 fantasy points in every single game this season. And I understand that this is actually kind of a tough matchup at the running back position against the Denver Broncos, but I don't care. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's going to do it. He sent out a tweet after that Bills game last week, and he goes, my production is silent just like the H in my name. So he's silencing the haters. Don't worry about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Start him, get him in your lineup, and see him ball out.
Little bit of shade there from CEH, and you love to see it. And you love to see James Conner out there on the football field. He's had at least 15 fantasy points in 4 consecutive games. During those games, he's had at least 18 touches. It's weird. It's like if you give a running back more opportunities, they score more points. That's wild. Anyways, the Tennessee Titans have allowed the 6th most rushing yards per game to running backs this season, coming in at 112.4 rushing yards per game. All right, let's go to the must-start wide receivers for Week 7. Florio, who is your must-start wide receiver?
I think you have to start Stephon Diggs this week. The Bills get the Jets, and I know they're coming off of 2 down games against the Titans and the Chiefs, so I think that Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, they're going to be a little bit angry this week, but we've already seen them have a lot of success in this matchup this year, where Allen went for nearly 30 fantasy points, Diggs went for over 16, and that was one of his lower scores of the year. He's just been super consistent. He's getting a bunch of targets each year. It is each week, and it is a favorable matchup as the Jets give up a lot of yards to wide receivers this year. So get Stephon Diggs in your fantasy lineups.
Florio, 100% agree. Earlier I talked about Josh Allen wanting to get some revenge. 100% think that Stephon Diggs is in that same boat. All right, guys. Chase Claypool. I know we're rooting for Juju and we're hoping Juju gets back to fantasy production and fantasy gold, but you know who's already doing it? It's this guy, Chase Claypool. He's had 6 scrimmage touchdowns since week 2. That's tied for most in the NFL. Why I like Chase Claypool so much is because of what happens in the red zone. He has had 2 rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line this season. No other wide receiver has had any. Also, an important note, he gets 3 fantasy points per opportunity. That is the most in the NFL. So I know some people are still looking at Claypool as a flex option, but I completely disagree. I think he should be started on a week-to-week basis, and he's going to absolutely ball out against the Titans today.
Yeah, Chase Claypool has been fantastic, and I wasn't sure what to make of him, but he has been great so far this season. I'm going to go with Devontae Adams, and we've talked about the Aaron Rodgers petty party that seems to pop up every couple of weeks or so. And look, if he's going to be petty and he's going to be spiteful and he's going to take it to the Houston Texans, he's going to do it by throwing the ball to number 17 repeatedly. I mean, look, you're starting Devontae Adams anyway, and you see that there, 25 or more fantasy points in one of 3 games played this season. I think that number jumps up to 2 of 4 after this one, so I think he's going to get plenty of targets.
Yeah, I love Devontae Adams and all the Packers in this game, and I love Kenny Golladay for a lot of the reasons that we're going to continue to talk about through the rest of the season, because the Atlanta Falcons just allow so many fantasy points and so much yardage to wide receivers this season. And they've allowed close to 4 offensive touchdowns per game this year. That's the second most in the NFL, and they've allowed a top 7 fantasy wide receiver in 3 of 5 games. And also, I'm remiss, my daughter is watching the show right now, and she's upset that I'm not waving. So, sweetheart, this is
Aw,
Papa
hi,
waving.
Beverly.
This is Papa waving to you, okay? I'm waving to you, so I acknowledge you, and I will see you here in just a little bit. What about players who are going to be the toast of the town this week? Kimmy, can we start with you, please?
All right, I'm going to be quick on this one. It's going to be Teddy Bridgewater. This is a revenge game against the New Orleans Saints, even though there's no shade or revenge there. I just really do think that Teddy Bridgewater's got a ball out against the Saints that have allowed at least 3 passing quarterback touchdowns in every single game this season. So Teddy Bridgewater, have yourself a day in your old home.
I think it's going to be Justin Jackson going against the Jacksonville Jaguars. J. There's a whole lot of J's there. Look, he's taken over as the Austin Eckler sort of back there, and he's been more productive than Joshua Kelly, who's had some fumble issues against a Jaguars defense that's given up a lot of points to running back. So Justin Jackson, I think, is going to have a pretty big day.
Happy T. Higgins Day, everyone. I think it's going to be T. Higgins. The Browns have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers. And in the matchup earlier this year, the Bengals were peppering A.J. Green with a lot of targets. I think they see a matchup they like outside. But since that week, it's been T. Higgins that has really taken over as one of this team's top wide receivers. So I think he has a big game this week, and I think a lot of people are going to be talking about him.
You know what? I want that to be true, Florio, but I want it to be Tyler Boyd for all the reasons that you're talking about. I really do believe anytime that we get super hype on a player like T. Higgins, everybody's in on him. And then the player we forgot about, like everybody's forgetting like how good Tyler Boyd is. And that now he's going to have an opportunity to go out there and show what he can do and just, be a good player. That's what we want out of him. So I do appreciate that. By the way, want to remind everybody, check out the all-new NFL Fantasy app. You can watch games and highlights. And this was NFL Fantasy Game Day presented by Geico. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate you.